August 3rd, 2017, we're here interviewing Riley Pavelich. Where were you born, Riley?
I was born in Missoula.
And when?
In 1992.
Okay, your mother, your dad?
Marlene and Matt Pavelich.
Okay, your mom's maiden name was?
Hadman.
Where was she from, do you remember?
She's from Santa Monica, California.
Oh. Did she ever say where her parents were born?
They're from Pennsylvania and South Dakota or something like that.
Okay. And your dad was born?
In Mission.
Okay. And his dad?
Wyoming, maybe?
Oh, well, I think he still lives in Coeur d'Alene, or?
He's passed away.
Oh, did he? Okay. And so where did you grow up then?
I grew up on the Flathead Reservation, a couple different spots. I went to high school and I graduated from Hot Springs High School.
And where did you remember where you went to grade school?
A couple different places.
Did you? Thompson Falls, I think, was one. Okay. So, can you remember your first teacher?
Not really.
So, when did you come to Hot Springs? Do you remember your first teacher you had in Hot Springs?
I started in Hot Springs freshman year, and in high school you have a couple different teachers.
Oh yes, you have lots. Yeah. Was there a favorite?
Yeah, I really loved Mr. Estel.
And he taught what?
Science.
Science, okay. Did you go out for sports in high school?
Yeah, I did. I went out for basketball, volleyball, and track.
And how did your team do all those years?
We were pretty good in basketball the last couple of years. We were pretty good in volleyball. And then track, yeah, we were also pretty good.
So you went to state a few times?
Yeah.
Okay.
We went to state in basketball and in track.
So, okay. Who were some of your schoolmates, do you remember?
Let's see, Jocelyn Urschel, Matea DePoe, Jordan Fisher, Whitney Wood, Laramie Baker, Nick Malinak, Carter Ferrier. The list goes on.
I know, yeah. And when you were in Hot Springs, did you ever go to Cortner's Corner?
I don't think it was open ever.
It was closed when you were growing up. And the theater, I suppose, had burned already.
Oh, yeah.
So you didn't have a favorite hangout then?
We liked to soak in the pool.
So was the swimming pool at the bathhouse open then, or
No.
you had to go to the signs?
Yeah.
So. And did you take vacations, like up to the lake?
Yeah, sometimes up to Wild Horse Island, where we'd go down to California.
Okay, so you graduated in Hot Springs? And then did you go on to college? Or?
Yeah, I went to the University of Montana in Missoula.
Okay. And how many years did you go there?
I was there for 5 years. I studied abroad in France for one of those years.
Oh.
And I graduated top of my class in the French department.
Wow. So that's why you visited France then?
I was going to school there.
Oh, in France? You went to school? How was that?
It was challenging.
And were the students friendly? And
some of them were. Some of them weren't.
do you still have friends there now? Then?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, great. So when did you decide to start traveling, like to Africa?
Well, I had always really loved to travel, and I wanted to learn French in order to go to West Africa. So I already knew in college, I already knew in high school, it was always my dream to go to Africa.
And so you didn't get a grant or anything to go?
To Africa?
Yes.
I volunteered with the Peace Corps.
Okay, Peace Corps. Okay. And so how was that? Did you have to sign up a lot of different things of what you were interested in, or? in order to qualify?
I think in order to qualify, I don't really know what the process is. All I know is that I was accepted upon graduating from college. And I think it was important that I had the French language skills. And I had done a certain amount of volunteer work. So I was accepted into the community health and malaria prevention program.
In Africa?
In West Africa.
Okay, and where did you go in Africa then?
I was in a country called Togo.
Was it a lot of people there, or is it heavily populated, or?
Not really. It's pretty undeveloped. It's very, very undeveloped there.
A raw country then?
Very, very raw.
And so what all did you do there?
Well, I lived in a little tiny village with no running water and no electricity for 2.5 years. And I worked in the clinic at this village, and I helped deliver babies, and I helped vaccinate children, and we gave medicine to people suffering from malaria. We distributed bed nets. We did a lot of talks about women's rights and the importance of girls' education. We did a lot of things. I got to work at the school, at the elementary school in my village, doing fitness education and girls' self-empowerment. We also dug a well that became the primary source of water for the entire village.
So how did you dig? You didn't have a machine, did you?
We did.
Oh, did you get a machine? So where did the machine come from?
It came all the way from the capital city.
Wow. And do they usually do that for different villages? If it's requested, maybe?
If you can pay for it.
Oh. So how did you pay for it?
It was through an organization called Water Charity. I wrote a grant, and the Peace Corps put it up on their online forum, and then Water Charity was able to give us about $12,000 in order to complete the project.
So I heard that you learned to carry water on your head, though.
I did.
How was that? Interesting?
Yeah. It's hard. It's very physically challenging. It causes a lot of trauma on your skull and on your neck and on your back. It's not something I would wish upon my worst enemy.
So you were in Africa 2.5 years and doing all this. Do you think you made a difference?
Making a difference, that's kind of a vague term. All I know is that I was there, and I left something for them to remember me by, and I certainly made a lot of friends.
And so do you still keep in contact? Is it easy to do? I mean, mailing letters or?
No, we don't mail.
Interview with the computer, I suppose.
Yeah, we mostly do instant messaging. There are some international messaging apps that a lot of people have in Africa, and they're using them, so it's a good way to keep in touch.
That's great.
But the kids don't have these Android phones, and a lot of the women don't either, so I can keep up with my male work partners, but all my female work partners and all the kids I was close to, it's kind of hard to stay in touch.
So how did you get home then? Did you fly? Did you come back to Hot Springs then before you went to?
Yeah, let's see. I came home, and I came back to Hot Springs directly.
And then you were in Hot Springs and you worked around here. So
I was home for a few months, and then everything started to happen at Standing Rock, North Dakota.
okay.
So I went there, and I stayed there for 4 months.
So how was that? They didn't seem to get what they wanted when they protested.
I guess you could say it was sort of a protest fail because they put the oil pipeline through the land that we were trying to protect anyways. And they came in and removed everyone at gunpoint, you know, and used force, and they used pepper spray and mace and water cannons in the dead of winter and attack dogs. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me because I had never seen any police violence. I had never been on the other side of the law, kind of, you know. I had also never seen how a lot of people treat people of color. You know, I kind of thought everyone got treated the same way I got treated. And it was when I went to the Standing Rock Reservation that I really felt how racist it really is against people of color. You know, the North Dakota and the outer world.
But they weren't all tribal there. I thought they were, Standing Rock was tribal people. But they weren't tribal then, they were...
Well, people from all over the world were there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Like myself, you know, I'm not tribal. So people from all over the world, New Zealand, South America, Europe, you know, there were all different sorts of people there. And Standing Rock itself is a reservation.
Yes,
it's
that's
tribal.
what I thought.
But if you want to go, for example, to Bismarck, the capital of North Dakota, you're gonna feel some really bad vibes if you're with people of color.
That's strange because we don't notice that around Hot Springs.
No, we don't. Which is maybe one of the reasons why I was so naive about it.
Yes, we would be. We would be. And from Standing Rock, then, where did you go?
So things were getting pretty dicey in Standing Rock. President Trump ordered an evacuation of the area, but you know, the people who had been there for so long, they didn't want to evacuate. They wanted to stay and push their protest till the last day. But I left. I got on a Greyhound to get LA. And from Los Angeles, I flew to Delhi, New Delhi in India.
Oh, okay. So, how was that? How does it, when you fly like that over the ocean, is it different or from coming from Hot Springs when you're doing all this traveling? Do you have problem getting on the airplane or?
No, it's like my second home up there.
Wow.
But I mean, every time I travel, I get a little jittery. What if I miss this connection? What if I misread my ticket? You know, all those types of things. But the more you do it, the more confident, and you just have to do one step at a time. And then you get there.
And then you get off. Did you have people meeting you or did you just?
No, I got off in Delhi. I didn't have anyone meeting me. I didn't know anyone. I immediately got ripped off. But I learned my lesson after that first experience.
Well, you're not the only little one from Hot Springs that ever traveled and that happened to them. I remember other people telling me that story.
Yeah, well, you know, it was my own fault, really.
Yes, because you're so Hot Springs, you don't experience that kind of stuff.
Everyone was always just so nice to me and supportive.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Yeah. And also figuring out the exchange rate between the Indian money and the American money. I think if I had a little better grasp on that before I got there, I wouldn't have shelled out so much.
So, how long did you stay? Was that the first time? Did you go more often to India?
That was my first time in India. I was there for about 3.5 months, and I'm hoping to go back and stay for a few years if I can.
Oh, and you got acquainted fairly soon then?
I guess you could say, you know, India is a huge country, and I was only in one small city in the foothills of the Himalayas. And it's a place that's renowned for the study of yoga, which is what I'm really passionate about. So I was really only in one area of India, and there's still a lot left to explore.
Oh, so that's what you're going to do, go and explore more.
Well, I think I'm gonna go and study yoga more. So I'll probably just go right back to that same area.
And so you finally made friends then? So somebody
Yeah.
took you in and took care of you?
Yeah, I made some local friends, which made a huge difference. And when you have friends with the people who live there, you make friends with the people who live there, you get a much richer sense of the culture. And in India, they have a saying that the guest is God. So they really treat foreigners very, very well.
Great.
Yeah.
So, well, what else can you tell us about your travels?
Well, that brings us about up to speed, up to current. I can say that everywhere I've been, I've always felt a attachment to hot springs. I guess growing up, I lived a few different places, but my grandma always lived in Hot Springs, so ever since I was a kid, my family would always come here to visit my grandma. And then in high school, we moved here, have a house here, so I really feel like in the whole world, this is where I'm from, this is, my place, and I think feeling so secure and supported in my roots, it's allowed me to have a lot of courage to go explore the rest of the world.
And after India, do you have any thoughts of going anywhere else? South America? Or?
I'm really interested in everywhere, I would go anywhere. I love to travel. I love being in foreign locations. I love feeling new, different cultures. But my life goal is really to go back to Africa. Yeah.
And drill more wells?
Well, water wells, to be specific here. Actually, I really want to teach yoga.
Oh, and to African ladies. So, well, it's so interesting, everything you've done. You're traveling. And is it hard to meet people with different language then? When you meet people, like if you get off the airplane and
Yeah, it is
And how did you
challenging.
find a place to stay when you got to India?
So India, their official language is English because they were colonized by the British.
Oh.
So you'll find a lot of people that speak English.
Oh.
However, I kind of overestimated that, and I thought that everything would be in English and I'd have no problem. But then when I got there, all the street signs are written in Hindi, and all the people speak Hindi, and quite a few people know English, but they'll have a very pronounced accent, which if you just first get there, it's a little hard to understand.
So,
But I'm really interested in learning foreign languages. It's something that I think is very important as an English speaker, as opposed to assuming that everyone's going to speak English, that you make a real mental effort to learn a foreign language. And my degree is in French, and I also learned to speak an African language while I was living there, and I'm learning Hindi now. So I really love to learn languages, and that's one of my favorite things about traveling, is to be surrounded by this different kind of music of language.
well, and it's really interesting that you can speak now these 4 languages, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say I speak Hindi, but I'm gonna one day soon.
So it's to be able to translate, and like even your French, that's pretty universal too.
Yeah, and learning French in Europe allowed me to travel in West Africa, because a lot of countries in West Africa speak French. And already knowing French, I had a huge advantage when I went to
Oh, yes.
Togo, because I could already speak with local people and form more personal connections. And there's a kind of more joy when you understand what's going around you, and you understand why people are laughing, and you're in on the jokes, and you also feel more secure and more safe.
Because they have some of them have a great sense of humor that,
Absolutely. And that's such a great thing to be able to share with people.
their kind of history that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet any French that had been to the States?
You know, I had 2 friends that I met in France who came to visit me in the States. So that was good for them. Yeah, I did know a few French people that had been to the US. But mostly they just go to like Las Vegas and New York, call it good.
Hot Springs is
Yeah.
out of the way.
Right?
We get a lot of, I think, Chinese people or Japanese people here, I think.
And Russian, Ukrainian.
Oh, yes, Russian.
Yeah, that's a great thing about Hot Springs is that it is surprisingly multicultural for such a small, out-of-the-way town. Yeah.
So, well, George, you got any questions too now?
How tall are you?
5'7".
I think you pretty much hit it. I mean, as far as like your experiences and stuff, you know.
I really like the idea of the French because I had an exchange student that studied French too. And so she translates now in Montreal. She teaches and
Yeah, that's awesome.
translates and
I was just looking at one of my old atlases from, I don't know, 1955 or whatever, and the whole northwest globe part of Africa was all French
Exactly.
at that time.
Exactly.
It's just so funny to look through that atlas and see all the things that no longer exist, or there's something else, you know.
Right? And it's been a lot of redrawing of borders and stuff. But all of Northwest Africa speaks French to this day. You know, Senegal, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, all the way down the coast to Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, Benin, Cameroon. So
the children now, are they in school? Do they have very much schooling? Are they getting much schooling?
In the village I lived in, that was a big problem because they had a primary school, so they had an elementary school, but then the middle school was about 4 miles down the road, and it was interesting because it seemed like their standardized tests were really difficult, and a lot of kids failed the test between elementary to middle school, whereas in America we don't even have a test that we make, you know, 4th graders pass to try to be 5th graders.
Yeah.
Kind of everyone gets to continue. But in Togo, the education system was really strict, really tough. So a lot of kids dropped out after primary school. And then a few wanted to continue to go to middle school. So they would walk 4 miles in the morning, and then they'd come back home at lunch because they have a 2-hour lunch break, and then they'd walk back, and then they'd come home at night.
Cow.
And a few kids had bikes, but it was only the little boys that their parents ever bought the bikes for, because they have this idea, this old idea that's starting to change a little bit, that it doesn't amount to anything to educate a girl.
That's true, yeah, in those countries, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, you know, you kind of hear that attitude is out there in the world, but then to meet people who really firmly believe that a girl's place is at home and that she's to be seen and not heard. And I worked with some really inspiring, powerful women while I was there. For example, the midwife of the hospital. And it's only just now that women are starting to realize that their voices can be heard in a public discussion and that their ideas are important, you know. So it's a real turning point in Togo, and I would say in Africa in general, in terms of women's rights.
So, and I suppose you contributed some to that when you were so independent when you came.
Well, yeah, and you know, it's something I really felt inspired about, and in the Peace Corps they give you enough leeway to kind of do whichever projects you really want. So I went to all the rural schools and we talked about how important it was for girls to be educated, how important it was for girls to reach a certain age before they start having children, how important it was for women to have the confidence to speak in public.
That's got to be difficult for them to understand that it's okay.
Yeah, and thankfully I had my work partner, the midwife, and she would come because she, is much more fluent in the local languages, which we weren't speaking in French at this point. We were speaking in the villagers' language, the African language. And it was a little hard for me because as a young girl from America, I was given the same amount of respect as, the men, the chiefs. I always got to sit with the chiefs. I always got this huge amount of food, whereas all the other women had to go sit somewhere else. And they wouldn't get fed the same as me, and they wouldn't be able to speak with the chiefs like I would. So it was a really weird position to be in.
But you managed.
I got through it.
And it's so interesting to see that there's still that culture. People from Hot Springs like me, to know that it still goes on
Oh yeah,
in that world.
it does. We may have gotten over that hump quite a while ago in the USA, but a lot of countries are still dealing with it.
So is it, do you think the same way in India, their education outside of, were you able to study anything besides yoga? I mean, were you able to visit schools there?
I didn't do very much outreach work. I did visit an orphanage that's run by an organization from Europe. But I did speak with some women, and I think, India is a lot more developed than the country I was in Africa. I mean, it's not a first world country yet, but it's really catching up. So they're more aware of girls' education, and it's more widespread in India than it is in Africa. Although it's still tough, there's still villages where the girls don't go to school. There are still villages where a 10-year-old girl is getting married to a 45-year-old man. So those things still happen in India, but it's becoming more rare. And it's not happening in the cities as much. It's more happening in the rural areas. But what I noticed, I had a few friends, women, who were extremely well educated, master's degrees, very intelligent women, but once they got married, they weren't allowed to go to work because they live with their husbands and they live with their in-laws. And the in-laws say, why do you want to leave the house? Your husband makes enough money, just stay home and take care of us. And so that's what these women with master's degrees are forced to do, is just stay at home and take care of their in-laws and their children.
Do you think that technology and social media has helped spread the idea of independence for women in these places? That they see that other places women are free, or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah, the technology and the social medias, I think, is really accelerating the social development of these places. And in Africa, the people I met were super tech savvy. It may have been, everyone has those little Nokia phones. In all the crazy rural villages that don't have running water, they don't even have a road, but the people have cell phones, and now they're starting to have Androids. And that's really opening up people's perception of the world.
Yeah, because otherwise they have no ability to see what goes on around the world.
Yeah, how would they know, Even we used to watch movies. We had a big solar panel. We had one store in my village, and they had this huge solar panel which everyone used to charge their cell phones. And at night they'd bring out a TV and we'd watch movies made in Nigeria, African movies. But it was so fun. The whole village would come around this one TV and we'd be sitting outside watching these movies.
But it was when I was a kid. One TV was at the store.
Yeah, it was really like going into the past.
So, and were there wild animals like elephants in your village?
In Africa,
Zebras and
no. Most of the animals have been hunted to extinction in the area I was in.
even the elephants? And
Yeah.
there had been elephants, huh?
And if there are, they're on game reserves or protected, but just wild animals, no.
So did they have tame animals, dogs or anything?
They had a lot of dogs, which they would eat sometimes.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah. Cats, not so much. Lots of sheep. A few people had cows. But in India, you know, it's very different because people, there's a lot of Hindus in India, and a lot of Hindus can't eat cow at all, ever. And a lot of Hindus don't eat any meat at all. Some do, but a lot don't. For example, the city that I lived in for 3.5 months, it was against the law to consume meat in the city or alcohol. So in the whole city, you couldn't find meat in any restaurant, in any store, and you couldn't find alcohol anywhere either.
But they had restaurants.
They had restaurants, and they also had monkeys, wild monkeys, tigers, elephants, deer. So, you know, it was really interesting to see how the wildlife of a vegetarian culture and then see the wildlife of a carnivorous or meat-eating culture.
But did they grow grain or anything too for maybe rice?
Yeah, in Africa they grew corn a lot and sorghum, soy, rice, sweet potatoes, all sorts of things. And then in India, you know, I didn't get as in depth on my trip to India as I did in Africa, but I know that they grew corn and rice.
And so they didn't have water to grow crops and things, probably. In Africa.
In Africa, yeah. Well, you know, there's the rainy season and the dry season. So all the the growing season is restricted to the rainy season, which is about 4 months long. And during that time, they grow all the food that they're going to eat for the whole year. So it's really, like, if the rains come late, people get really scared, really anxious. They start doing water ceremonies. They start saying, like, who messed up? Who made the gods angry?
I suppose, yeah, they have to do their rain dancing and things.
They do indeed. Yeah.
Interesting. Yes. What else? Oh, the dress of the women. Oh, yes. They make their own clothes. And where do they get their material? Do they make their own material? Or?
In Africa, if you go to the market, and the markets are one time a week, you know, each village has their market once a week, and there will be merchants that come with all types of cloth, with beautiful designs, beautiful printed designs. I don't know if you're familiar with African cloth at all, but they're very colorful, very bright designs. So a woman will go to the market and she'll choose her cloth, and they'll haggle about the price, and then she comes home and she'll either bring that cloth to a seamstress or she herself will sew it into, and they like to have three yards of cloth, and one they'll use as a full skirt, so it goes all the way down to the ankles. The other they'll make into a top, and then the third they'll wrap around their heads.
So, wow.
And in India, most of the women were wearing saris, which are these beautiful, like, draped Princess Jasmine type cloth
You brought your mom one? Is that what you brought your mother?
No. I didn't buy any of them because they're so beautiful, but I would feel a little ostentatious wearing one. But I'm planning on trying it out next time.
Well, we would be tickled to see you in one, I'd say.
It would be quite the sight on a Hot Springs street to see a lady in a sari.
Well, that would be the excitement in Hot Springs for a long time.
I guess so. Because they're bare midriff and they wear a top and then a long skirt and they drape the cloth over their shoulders and down.
You see it on TV.
Yeah, you've probably seen it.
Yeah. But they must sew by hand.
In Africa, they have really basic sewing machines operated with a foot pedal.
Oh.
Non-electric. And then in the cities, they do have electricity, so they can run a current and, hem it or.
So how do they make money then to buy things at the market?
Usually, they'll sell their grain, or they can sell livestock.
So they have a different kind of money, or their money thing is they trade like.
Well, they do have, banknotes.
Oh.
It's called the Central African Bank or something like that. And so this currency is a federation of pretty much all the West African countries. They use this this money, and it's 500 sefa for $1. So they do that. But yeah, most people have to trade their goods in order to get money. They have to sell their goods.
Oh, yeah. Because it seems like when they're a poor nation, that the money situation isn't as free as in the States. I mean, it's just.
It's hard to come by. I lived with people who would survive off $1 US all month. Just amazing how they know how to survive.
Yes, that's what they're surviving. That's what they're doing over there.
Yeah.
So, and you feel that you made a difference? Well, I guess I asked you that.
I don't think you ever know how you really affect places or people, and I'm not really interested in trying to imagine, what kind of effect I had on them, but they kept me alive for 2 years and showed me their culture and their hospitality and their love, and I, tried to give as good as I got.
So when you had breakfast, what did you eat for breakfast?
My favorite thing, they had these nomadic cow herders who lived out in the bush, and I would walk out to their settlements and ask them for milk, and they would give me some fresh milk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it from cows or camels?
It was from cows. Really, really delicious milk. So that was my favorite breakfast.
So, and then for lunch?
It was so difficult to eat in Africa. That was probably my biggest challenge, because in my village, the only things you could buy were tomato paste, pasta, and rice. So, that's not a full balanced diet at all. And people probably ate meat once a month, maybe, because it was a really big deal. It involved killing one of their livestock, which represents potential money or something.
Yes.
So we hardly ever ate meat, and
so you ate the same thing for a supper then, or lunch, or supper.
So I ended up eating. I made a friend with this elderly woman, and she didn't speak any French, so we just communicated in the local language, and she really helped me learn Lamba. And I would go to her house every afternoon because she was able to go into the bush and forage for, edible plants, edible fruits. She was really knowledgeable about how to live off the land. So, I would have been eating tomato sauce and rice every day, but she had all these greens, all these different sauces, all these different vegetables.
Because she knows which ones were edible and which ones might have been poisoned.
Right, and she would go off into the bush and walk around and forage. And their main meal that they eat, you take corn powder, corn meal, and you cook it with water, and it becomes kind of like this paste. And you eat it with your hand, and you dip it in the sauce. And it's not very nutritious, but it kept me alive.
So when you traveled out to the bush, what kind of people were out there living in the bush? They kind of native-like more? You said they must milk their cows to get your milk.
Well, there were a few different tribes or ethnicities of people living near my village. So there were I guess you could say the permanent residents who were of one ethnic group. And then you had these nomadic cow herders that kind of come and go, and they would be on the peripherals.
Around your village.
And those nomadic people were primarily Muslim, whereas the permanent residents were more animist or Christian.
But the ones out in the bush had cows, so that's interesting.
Yeah, apparently they stole them.
Oh.
They're good cow rustlers.
And how about chickens or geese or anything?
Lots of families raise chickens and geese and guinea fowl.
But they must not eat any of their chickens.
Rarely. For a special occasion, they might kill a chicken. Otherwise, that was the whole family's source of income.
Wow.
They could maybe take it to the market and sell it for...
And eggs, probably.
Yeah, and eggs. And eggs, it was interesting because I worked a lot on childhood malnutrition. It's a really big problem in West Africa. And I was working at a clinic, and you would see these kids come in and they're so underweight, just little tiny arms and legs. And so we're trying to get the mothers to feed them more nutritiously. But in Africa, they have this idea that the really nutritious food should go to the elderly people, and that the kids eat the least and the least nutritious food. So they said you can never feed eggs to a child because that child will turn into a thief. And I guess their logic is that the eggs are so good that the child's going to, if they taste it, then they're going to steal it. So that was an interesting thing to try to combat and say, no, please feed your child eggs, please feed your child meat, please give them large portions, please feed them before they go to school, please feed them before you ask that they do hard labor.
Well, you see them on TV, they're skinny little, and their little bellies are all bloated up, and that's the reason then. That's because they aren't allowed to eat.
It's a way different attitude towards children, and it's a different hierarchy. In America, the children are the most important component of the family, whereas in Africa, there's such a high infant mortality rate that I don't think people really grow attached to children until they get past a certain age.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's so different, isn't it, George?
Absolutely.
You don't, unless somebody tells you, you can picture it, yeah. How hard it is for them over there, especially women.
Especially girls. Yeah. And it's the girls that are responsible for carrying water. And it's the girls that are responsible for getting firewood. And it's the girls that are responsible for milling the corn. It's the girls that are responsible for cooking. girls just have to work so hard there.
So what do the boys do then?
Boys have a lot more time to study and do homework. Boys frequently go to school longer than girls do. Boys farm, they do farm work.
So do any of them ever leave and go to different parts of the country? Or do they still live in the same area as they grow older?
Yeah, there is, within the country, there's some travel, you know, they'll go visit their relatives here or there. It's really great if they can go to the capital city because there's more opportunity there. A few of them can go to Benin or Nigeria, to the neighboring countries. In my village, nobody had gone abroad, but if you go to the capital city, you'll meet people who have been to Europe, who have been to America. So I think that would be a really important step and a really big thing just for global equality if these people in Africa were able to have that same perspective and able to come to America and see how we eat and see how we treat children and see what our attitude towards women are. You know, it would really speed up their development if they were able to travel.
And then go home and take what they learn would be great.
Exactly.
I think everybody would agree to that, to have them come over. But when they come here, they want to change to their ways, it seems like.
Well, you know, it's a very big culture shock. It's very different, you know. It's really hard to grow up completely isolated with a very strong culture your whole life and then immediately come here and do a total 180.
It's so
And for example, I mean, there's a lot of things that I think in Africa, you wouldn't want them really to change to our way of doing things.
Well, sure.
Like, for example, their sense of hospitality, they'll give you the clothes off their back, you know, they'll kill their last chicken to give you a good meal as a stranger. For them, they believe that if a stranger knocks on your door, you have to take care of them like your whole pride depended on how you take care of foreigners, strangers. Whereas if you look at our country, it seems like we have this whole phobia about foreigners and coming into our country and not following our ways, not speaking our language. But for them, you know, they'll give you the best seat in the house.
So, right. I know it used to be that way, that when somebody walked by your home and when they visited you, everything in the cupboard came out.
Right.
You got to sit down and eat, you know, yeah. But anymore, I guess you just sit down and watch TV.
You know, and we don't have that same just love of strangers. We don't, you know, because we have a lot more stimulation. We don't live in a tiny village where if someone new comes to town, we all know about it.
So,
Even though in Hot Springs it is kind of
we do. When everybody's house is sold, we know who buys it.
It's true.
So,
It's like they practice more humanity than we do anymore.
They really do.
You know.
And I have to say, I never really learned how to share until I went to Africa. I mean, you think, oh yeah, you know, I'm not greedy, I'm not mean, I can share, but until you're hungry and someone else is hungry right next to you, and in their culture, if you're eating and someone approaches you, you have to ask them to eat with you. That's like your first thing. And so just learning how to share my food when I was hungry, share my water when I had to go carry it back, you know, all these things, it was really hard for me.
It seems like when people have to struggle on a daily basis for everything they have or everything they will have, that there is a closer communication between people and humanity rather than, well, we have everything we want, I don't need anybody.
Right, you don't even have to go outside, you know?
No.
I mean, you can go through the automatic teller and don't have to say hello to anyone. You don't have to keep up good relations with your neighbors.
Absolutely.
Whereas in my village, the beginning of every morning, when people are waking up, you go outside and you have to say hello to every single person that you see. You know, you can't walk by someone. You have to address them. You have to say hello. And it really created a sense of community and of love. You know, it felt like the village was one big extended family. And, you know, when this family's hungry and this family has rice, they share. And it was a beautiful feeling. I really learned a lot in Africa about humanity, and that's one of the reasons why I really want to go back.
Oh, yes. You'll have to keep in contact with us over here more.
I'll have to.
Yes. So in your hospital, when you were taking care of people, was vaccine and everything readily available?
No. We had every 3 weeks or every month we had our vaccination, and we used to have a propane charged refrigerator to hold the vaccines at our hospital, but then we ran out of propane or something, so we had a doctor who would come by our clinic sometimes, and that doctor would bring the vaccines in a cold pack. So it was only that one day, and
then all the kids would come that needed it,
Right,
and you
all the babies.
contacted the kids.
Uh-huh.
So exactly what all did you vaccinate for? Malaria? Did you say malaria?
You know, there is no vaccination against malaria.
Oh.
Even when I was there, I had to take a pill every single day against malaria. We, kind of same things as we vaccinate here: measles, mumps, polio, tetanus, scarlet fever, yellow fever, things like that.
And malaria is caused by mosquitoes. Did you have a lot of mosquitoes there?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a real challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here too sometimes with mosquitoes.
Yeah, in America we used to have malaria. Yeah, it used to be a thing. But then we targeted certain swamps that had the certain mosquito, because it's not all mosquitoes that carry malaria. And we targeted them with chemicals and we killed them all. Which I was really thinking that, well, if it worked in America, we should do it in West Africa, we could save thousands of children's lives. But now, no one wants to use chemicals, no one wants to use DEET, which to me it's kind of like, well, people are dying, And if it was good enough for the United States, why isn't it good enough for West Africa? But the only thing they really can do against malaria there is sleep under bed nets. And that's only 8 hours of the day, That's not full-time protection. And it's terrible. People get malaria 2 or 3 times a year, and a lot of children die from it. And eventually you kind of build up a tolerance.
Get immune.
The adults become immune, but the children, it was a terrible thing. They go into convulsions, they're hallucinating with these super high fevers.
And you lost a lot, I suppose.
I saw children die, it's a terrible thing.
And it's funny that they can't research the different diseases and like with the mosquitoes and fix them up so that they kill each other. There's some way they change their genes or something, or their little whatever they call it.
You would think we would be clever
knowledge. They should be able to figure out some way to. They're trying, I think, in Florida to do that kind of thing. And here they vaccinate horses, I think, for West Nile, is it?
Right.
Because that's a mosquito thing. We've had a few people here that got West Nile too.
Oh, wow.
have diseases that's pretty rampant in, I guess, like Africa. And India, it wasn't so bad.
India, where I was, I was in a city, so I didn't get the full experience of how the very poor people live. But yeah, I mean, it was very cosmopolitan. I'd say it's practically like the U.S. in terms of how people eat. I mean, they eat differently, but they eat well, and they eat 3 meals a day, and they have protein every day,
And feed their children.
and they feed their children a lot, and all their kids go to super good schools and get great educations and become competent to compete on the global market.
Yes, we have a lot coming to the United States.
It seems like in India, their education system is way more rigorous than ours. I knew a little boy in 4th grade, and he showed me his homework, his math and science homework. I had no idea. I couldn't sit there and finish his homework at all. I would have to study and review just to be able to do his elementary problems.
It was probably already calculus and algebra and geometry all in one.
Gee, I don't even know, like talking about all these scientific processes and
Formulas and-
the chart of elements and all these things.
Yes.
It's crazy.
I think our schools are going backwards.
I guess so.
Slipping.
They are. And then I was really surprised to see how advanced and how hard they push the students in India. And even in Africa, their curriculum was really difficult. And they had so many different subjects. Even in elementary school, you're going to have French class, you're going to have math class, you're going to have reading, you're going to have writing, you're going to have science, you're going to have history. You have all these different subjects. So it's really hard for the kids to succeed in Africa because they don't really get the support from the parents that they need. Whereas in India, I think the parents are very supportive of their children's education.
Well, it's probably not important in Africa with parents.
Not yet.
They still, there's like a generation gap because for the parents, they live in a time where you did what your parents did, you live where they live, you got married in your same village, and you are a farmer. But now, with social media and cell phones, kids are realizing that there's a lot more out there.
I think too, I'm always in confusion why you can have people from other countries, young people, come here, and within a few years they're running a business. And yet you watch your own people grow up and, well, maybe I'll work, maybe I won't,
Right.
And I really think that people that are given too much compared to someone that grows up with nothing or next to nothing, there's such a difference there, but obviously I guess that's human nature, is if you're given something, why should I have to work?
Right. And like you said earlier, the struggle, people that know how to struggle and they're not afraid of struggling,
Right.
They're develop so much more character. And
Yeah, and that's why they have no fear of, they have an opportunity, they're gonna go for it. It may fail, it may work, but most of the time it works.
and for them it's just a question of survival, It's not, oh, am I going to have the 3-car garage or the 5-car garage? It's, am I going to be alive and have children or be able to feed my children, So
Yeah.
and in India too, there's almost 1 billion people. They have the 2nd largest population in the world. And it's not a first world country. It is very advanced. It's developing quickly. But it's not like America. It doesn't have the same road systems. It doesn't have the same urban planning. But so I think for that reason, the kids, there's so much competition between kids. And you see it in their standardized tests. They print the results out in the newspaper, and the kids just die from anxiety all before the test. And so there's so much competition for them to succeed in academics because they know that the top candidates will get to go to England, to America, to China. You know, they get to get out and hit the big time.
So the different yoga that you've learned now, when you go back, what kind of, will you learn different? Is there different kinds?
There's a lot of different kinds. I'm planning on studying the same variety of yoga because I want to, have a really solid education in it, and I think it's better to stick with one thing and study it extensively than kind of dipping in here and there. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of my personality. But there's a lot more to yoga than just the physical flow. There's a lot of purification type things, mental, spiritual,
and spiritual
practices. It's yoga is something that was developed over 6,000 years ago, mm-hmm. and they've got a lot of ancient texts. They have more ancient texts than Christianity. Mm. So it's like a very profound subject to study.
So how do they don't have books, so...
They do.
Oh, do they?
Absolutely.
So you can go into a book and I was picturing parchment paper and...
Well, I think for a long, long time, yoga was from a guru to the student, and then that student became someone else's guru, so it was transmitted directly. Mm. But eventually, they decided to kind of open it up and make it more accessible to people, so you didn't have to travel to the Himalayan mountains to find a guru to learn how to do yoga. So they codified it, they wrote down in books. The earliest written text about yoga was the Yoga Sutras, which was written 2,000 years ago.
Wow.
And then after that, people keep researching, keep coming up with different things and writing it down. So there's whole libraries of yoga books out there.
Wow, so you'll be there quite a while studying everything you want to.
Yeah, it's a really, it started off yoga, it was entirely psychological. People practiced it just for psychological benefits, and it's only been recently that they say, oh yeah, there's all these physical benefits too. Oh yeah, this activates your digestive system, and this, reduces stress. And before that, it was entirely psychological.
With spiritual and...
Yeah, meditation and self-realization, stuff like that.
Wow. So you can hardly wait to go back.
I can hardly wait. I am really excited.
And the same village, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And this time I have friends meeting me in the airport, so should go a little smoother.
So, well, George, I guess.
Yep.